So what is DevOps? I really like the definition that Safe gives for DevOps. It's basically all the activities that happen from the moment somebody has an idea until basically the user is benefiting from that idea. So by that definition, everybody within the company is part of DevOps, and I think that's the way things should be. Though in the industries, DevOps is sometimes limited to the infrastructure role. The infrastructure by itself is not really going to cover what DevOps is meant to be. DevOps, if you analyze the name by itself, it's development and operation. So the idea is that you want both the development team and the operation team to be working hand in hand to deliver value. So the question is why? It sometimes seems a lot more efficient when developers are just developing, writing the code, and the operation team is organizing, they're setting up their SLAs, and they're making sure that their work is efficient. Why do we need to combine them? And to kind of elaborate or explain this a little bit, we're going to step out of the software industry and we're going to look at the construction industry. Generally, we have a company that does the construction, that builds the residential areas, and then we have another company that handles the maintenance of those areas. Now, what usually happens is when you are building a residential area, you have a deadline and you have a budget. And what happens when you're short, like when your deadline is near or you're a little bit short on the budget, you sometimes may cut certain corners, and these corners are not necessarily visible at the point where the person or the company that is going to be operating the residence is able to notice those changes. You might not notice those changes until 1 year after you've lived in the house. Now, in order to remove this type of incentive, we sometimes want the same developer to be in charge of the operation of the building itself. This way, they know that if they cut certain corners, they're going to be the one who assume the cost of the maintenance. So when you have the same company handling both the responsibility of building something and operating something, they have an incentive to build something that lasts. A similar setup is in the oil and gas industry, where you have sometimes a company that does the drilling and then another company that does the operation of the well. Now, again, what happens is sometimes the company that does the drilling, they cut certain corners that make it a little bit harder for the operating company to maximize the benefit out of that well. A similar situation is actually in development within the software industry. When we are building certain things, there are certain practices that basically reduce the speed at which you can produce code. Ideally, they maximize the speed at which you produce value, but they are slowing down the developers if the developer's scope of concern is only writing the code and writing an application that runs. And by the same virtue, the operation team, if their main interest is just stability and not, again, necessarily the creation of value, then any change to the system is a risk to the stability. So they're going to be resistant to any change, any update to the system, because that's going to introduce some risk. So that's why it is very important to have these two areas of concern working hand in hand together so that they're not working against each other. It's okay sometimes maybe to cut certain corners, but you have to have visibility on how much effect that is going to have on the operation of this software. How easy it's going to be to troubleshoot, how easy it's going to be to deploy, how easy it's going to be to handle all the expected changes that we usually have with the software that we deploy. And from the other side, yes, we have a lot of compliance rules, we have a lot of security standards that we need to comply with, but at the end of the day, we have to deliver some sort of value to the customer. So what is the compromise that is acceptable that we can make to ensure that value is delivered responsibly to the customer? So that's where DevOps comes in. The idea is you really want both the concern of developing something and then handed it to the user and operating it. Both of these concerns, you want them to be present at every step of the development. Otherwise, what ends up happening is each person is going to focus on their own concern, and sometimes they might just work across from each other.